Welcome to today's coffee conversation. I'm your host, Christine Renee, and I'm joined by my co-host, Isabel Wells. And today I'm going to start things off a little different. And I want you to observe as we get this coffee conversation going. I'm recording this intro after the fact because I want you to pay attention to something. When we started the coffee conversation today, we were dealing with tech issues. Facebook was not cooperating, and I was getting stressed out. And I want you to pay attention to the way my voice and tone changes over the conversation as I went from a stressed out, my nervous system is being activated, to coming into my flow, coming into my alignment as we speak. So as you listen, because there's so much beautiful information in this coffee conversation on shamanic self-care, I also want you to pay attention to the voice and the dynamic and the conversation and the flow between Isabel and myself as you see that we particularly me, Christine, come down, kind of find my baseline once again, and then really find our flow together. So I'm not going to trim it out. I'm going to leave it in so that it can be used as an educational tool, hopefully. If you have questions, as always, feel free to reach out to us, and I hope you enjoy this conversation. Thanks so much for listening. Hello, welcome. We are back live. We were planning on doing our Facebook group today, and it is not working out. So I would love for you to either come on over to the page, or you can join the Zoom. So we're just letting people know where we are so that you are more than welcome to watch where it's most comfortable. So Facebook has done some changes where we are not allowed to live stream into a group any longer. You are only allowed to live stream into a page or your normal, like your business page or your like fan page, your personal page, but you can't live stream into a group. So that, and in the group, apparently, if you go from a computer where we'd like to record our conversation so we can have it for our podcast, we can't bring on a group or a guest, so we couldn't come on live together. So we're all learning as Facebook is making some changes, and we will get started here shortly as soon as we can bring on our lovely Isabel. I hope it is only looking up from here on out as we discuss our shamanic self-care for today. Thank you so much, Izzy, for being here. I think I'm going to change our view just so that I can see you. I'm like, you're here, right?
Yeah, I'm here. Hello, everybody. Good morning. Thank you so much for bearing with us through all of the tech difficulties. As Christine said, our Facebook platform has decided that we can no longer live stream from Zoom into the group. And so we've had to improvise this morning, and hopefully next week will be much smoother. But I am so glad that everybody is here, everybody found us, and that we are all together as this fantastic way to start our Monday morning. So let us know what you're drinking, where you're watching from. We've got beautiful. Okay, well, we are 15 minutes in. I think this is a lovely time to kind of transition. And I would love, in light of all of our tech issues, to just start us off with a big deep breath, whether you're here with us on Zoom or you are watching us on Facebook. So let's just start off today's conversation on shamanic self-care by taking that big deep breath, because our breath is one of the ways that we can connect to nature, connect to the trees around us, connect to this amazing life force energy that we have that gets to flow through us. There are also some really beautiful studies that show that taking 3 deep breaths is enough to switch us from a sympathetic or fight or flight nervous system state into a parasympathetic or rest and digest nervous system state. So let's just start with our 3 deep breaths together and see where we go. So you can just settle back in your chair, let your eyes close, just let your body relax. And going at your own pace or following mine as you breathe in through your nose, out through your mouth. In through your nose, out through your mouth. One more. Deep breath in. Deep breath out. Beautiful. So welcome, welcome, welcome to today's coffee conversation. Now that we've taken our deep breath and we're ready to start our chat, we're going to be talking about shamanic self-care today. As you guys know from being members of the Reiki Cafe community and following along on your own spiritual and healing journey, self-care is incredibly important. You know, there are so many analogies that we use for this: filling your own cup first, putting on your own oxygen mask. And while those do tend to be a little cliche, there's a reason that they exist, right? There's a reason that we need to keep up with our self-care and make sure that we're honoring who, where, and how we are in this moment so that we can continue to do our healing work, both for ourselves and others. So we're going to be diving into all aspects of self-care, but also taking a look at the shamanic approach to self-care and some tools and techniques that you can use to keep up with your energetic hygiene, to stay grounded in your wellness and in your healing, and keep moving forward, feeling really aligned and connected to yourself and to the divine. So that is how we're going to start today's coffee conversation. And I would love to just start by taking a look at, as we do, what is self-care? Why is it important? I think there are so many amazing movements happening right now, especially in the mental health community and in the spiritual community, about how we need to be able to take care of ourselves, right? And for a lot of people, you know, right now that's taking a bubble bath or having a glass of wine or whatever it is, right? There are these very stereotypical aspects that we see right now, again, especially in the mental health community, about what self-care looks like. And I think a lot of times what ends up happening is we end up feeling like I'm not doing self-care right. Like if we don't fit that picture of taking a bubble bath with our glass of wine and a piece of chocolate, then it's not really self-care. And so one thing that we kind of want to throw out the window from the start of this conversation is this idea that there's a right way to do self-care, because what self-care really is coming into alignment with yourself. And the highest act of self-care that we can do is honoring and accepting exactly how we're feeling in each moment and letting that be enough. And so if we're trying to fit into this picture perfect idea of what self-care looks like, we're not honoring ourselves. We're not taking a moment to look at, how am I actually feeling? What do I actually need right now? If I were brutally honest with myself, is one of my favorite questions to ask when it comes to self-care. If I was brutally honest with myself, what do I really need right now? Those questions are the highest form of self-care that you can practice, because it's really looking at you and yourself rather than looking at what is it supposed to look like or how am I supposed to be doing this. So I invite you to kind of throw away, you know, like, to be honest with yourself, what ideas do you have about how self-care should look, and just maybe throw that away for this conversation and be open to having some new ideas, or open to really just looking at yourself and being honest with what you need in this moment. Christine, any adds to that?
Yeah, I love that we are bringing in this conversation today. And a lot of times I feel like people don't recognize the self-care that they need. Like they're so caught up in their lives and the busyness of the world that they don't even recognize it. So I'm a big fan of just like scheduling it in anyway. Like we don't know what we don't know. If it's not in our conscious awareness, if it's something that's stuck on a deeper layer, how can we just program it into our week so that there's space? So if all we're doing is rush, 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 push down emotions and feelings, are we giving it a time, a moment to allow this to come to the surface, to be processed, to take a deep breath and have that parasympathetic nervous system be like, oh yeah, life is okay. I can take a deep breath. And I'm so glad we started that way. Izzy totally did that for me, you guys. Like she knows me so well. So for example, like I personally, I love having a weekly Reiki session. And that is like my built-in self-care. And it's really lovely to go, what is going to serve me? Because there's so many different routes of self-care in general. And when we look at I want a shamanic self-care. So if we bring it a level, another layer, what can a shamanic self-care look like? So for example, my Reiki sessions, they're all shamanic. Like the person who does my sessions is doing a shamanic journey at the same time. And that's a lovely way just to have it built into my schedule. It's so worth it because I recognize that my go-to, I don't know, conditioning is anxiety, right? And so if I know that I'm an anxious person and I don't even oftentimes realize I'm acting anxious or worried about something, it's just my nervous system is overactive, right? So if I get my Reiki session, my shamanic Reiki session, and then I'm like, oh my God, I feel amazing. I'm like, oh, there was that anxiety that I didn't even realize was rearing its ugly head because sometimes we're just not aware. We're just trying to get all the things done. And where head is so full of all of the things that we need to do or should do or think about. And when we have that base layer scheduled in, it doesn't even matter if it is actually a session or it's the bubble bath where we're listening to a shamanic guided meditation, or, like there's so many different ways to give yourself permission to take care of oneself. And I think that is such a key important issue. Like, are you making yourself a priority? And why do we need to make ourselves a priority? And how do we make ourselves a priority? And how can we get to a self-worth place of going, I'm worthy to make myself a priority?
And I think when we look at it that way, something that I love telling our students at Reiki Cafe University is this idea of, at the end of the day, we are all just looking for someone to give us permission to feel the way we feel, to act the way we want to act, to do the things we know we need to do for our well-being. And I think the highest level of healing comes in when you realize that you are the only person at the end of the day who can give yourself that permission. And so this is part of why developing a self-care practice, it is a practice, because it takes practice to be willing to tell yourself, no, I am worthy to take this time, or I am worthy to have this feeling. It's okay to feel however it is I'm feeling in every moment. And we have so much programming and weight around how we act and how we feel and what we say and what we think in each and every situation, that there's not a single one of us that isn't going to have some kind of resistance or frustration or tension around the idea of self-care in some capacity. And so knowing that if this is you, if you are struggling with feeling like self-care is a really difficult thing for you, it's okay. It's natural. But what we want to do is we want to kind of shift away from this idea that self-care is something that we have to earn, or that we have to work really hard so that we deserve self-care. Self-care is the ability to come back into that state of balance, right? And this is really where we go back to looking at, when we're taking a shamanic perspective of self-care, we really want to look at from the very start, what does that mean to have a shamanic perspective? And so shamanism is that practice of being able to connect with and engage with non-ordinary reality. And so another way of phrasing that is, shamanism is the ability to connect with the spiritual underside of this physical reality, right? To extend beyond our five senses and look at the spirit, look at the emotions, look at the thoughts, look at those energetic forms that make our reality what they are, but that we're often unconscious of. And so if we take this perspective for self-care, what we're really doing is we're going into ourselves at an energetic spiritual level, and we're looking at, where am I out of balance? Shamanism places a really beautiful emphasis on this idea of balance, on balancing, whether it's the four directions or the different winds or the different elements or whatever it is, however you're bringing this in. There's this really beautiful foundation in shamanism of balance, balancing all these different aspects of yourself. And so when we are taking a shamanic approach to self-care, what we're really doing is going into ourselves on an energetic, emotional, and thought-based level. And we're looking at, where are the imbalances? So using Christine's example, if you're feeling really anxious, the imbalance is that you're not grounded, you're not present, you're not calm. And so your self-care that day is going to be something like a shamanic Reiki session, like going out in nature and talking to a tree, like finding those spaces where you can get really grounded and go deeper and calm. Whereas if you're really struggling with depression or a really heavy, slow emotion. The imbalance is that there's not enough of that lightness, there's not enough of that fire. And so your shamanic self-care might be doing a fire ceremony, it might be doing some breath work, it might be having a dance party and bringing back into balance these different elements of your being. And so this is part of why, whether you are a shamanic practitioner or you're just new to the concepts, this is part of why having a shamanic emphasis in your journey, no matter where you are, can be so helpful. Because what it really does is, much like the chakras, it gives us this framework through which we can understand more about ourselves and look at, where am I imbalanced? Where do I need more self-care? Where am I not giving myself permission to do what I need to do so that I can come back into that state of balance? And so this is really, we can take it as far as we want it to go, right? We can lean fully into the shamanic ideas and be doing our shamanic journeys and having our sage and connecting with the tree and talking with nature and doing our shamanic Reiki sessions and all of these things. And we can really lean into the spiritual aspect. And we can also look at it from the idea point of view of that idea of balance, that idea of harmony, that idea of, how am I on all levels of my being, not just this physical body, but spiritually, emotionally, psychologically? How am I, knowing that I am a multifaceted, multi-level human being, and I am a spiritual being through that? How do I need to come back into balance? What do I need to be able to acknowledge and hold space for all of these different parts of me, no matter where they are or how they're feeling?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think there's a huge emphasis of just recognizing that imbalance. And, there's so many different ways to kind of give yourself a breath. And I think that's a really great start, just to bring in the self-awareness, is like, can you take a 5-minute breather and go, where am I in balance and alignment and flow? And where am I out of that balance? Is it a particular chakra or energy center? Is it in my masculine and feminine? Is it in what elements are related to that? Like, I think all of that, like whatever lens you look through that makes sense to you, it doesn't really matter which lens you use. And I think people get really caught up on like, we have to use this system to look. And I'm like, use whatever system you want. It can be Ayurvedic. It can be, there's so many, it's astrology. There are so many systems out there, and you probably all have your favorites, right? And it's just like, some person might want to do a pendulum and another person's going to do tarot. And like, it's all good. All of it's great. It's all fine. There's no judgment there. Whatever path feels good to you, but are you taking that 5 minutes to tune in and going, am I in balance and in flow? Because when we're in balance and we're in flow, guess what? Spirit, nature, divine, whatever you want to call it for you, is going to come through really strongly and help guide you along your path. It's going to be more reassuring to be on that, in the vortex, in the flow state, in the zone of magic. Notice how there's all these different kinds of languages we use, right? And when we're there, we know we're there because the synchronicities happen. The things that show up, the trust that we have in the divine happens. And so when we're not in that flow state, we can look at what is out of flow, what is discombobulated, what feels heavy, and how can I bring balance into it? And I think the self-care just allows us to come back into that parasympathetic nervous system to help us recognize what feels heavy, right? There's that shadow piece that we've been talking about at ReikiCafe Radio, right? Like that heaviness, how can we love on it? How can we accept it as part of who we are? And recognizing where we need to create healthy boundaries in our life, how we need to not suppress, and then take a vacation from our life, right? Like, I think part of it is, culturally speaking, we have this tendency to need to show off our productivity, to work ourselves to death, quite literally, like where we lose our soul, where we lose our spirit, right? And so we live in a conditioning that really doesn't recognize that you're worthy of the break until you're having a breakdown. And I myself have been there, right? That was my go-to. If you would have talked to me 10 years ago, that's what I was doing. I needed to run myself ragged to be seen that, oh, maybe you should take a break. And that invitation to take a break never came, right? I had to go, you know what? I'm worth it. I don't need to come to a point of having a mental breakdown crisis to know that I'm worthy to take time for myself. And when we can come to that place, then we can invite that shamanic viewing of the world of going, what's going to support me in this? What elements do I need to bring in? What balance do I need to bring in to come there, to bring myself into a steady space? And that may or may not include outside help, right? And that's okay. And so there are lots of shamanic tools that most people are familiar with, like smudging is a really familiar tool to most Reiki practitioners, and it's a great start. But then there's all these other tools. What if we, instead of doing a Reiki brush off, we do it with a feather? What if we took a rattle and shook the rattle over us, trying to just bring that energy forward so then we can wipe it away? What if we did that with the drum? What if we sat 10 minutes with the drum and let that regulate our nervous system? So beating a drum, like all of those things, like the drum itself is really representative of the earth beat of Mother Earth. So it's getting reconnected with Pachamama through the vibrational healing of the drum. And so there's lots of very easy, basic ways that we can start our self-care approach with, including some of these shamanic pieces to help regulate our nervous system to come back into our centered space. And then from there, it's a much easier to go, I'm worthy of this. I deserve this. I recognize this is the area of my life that needs some attention or that needs to be released. I think that's why I love shamanism in general so much, because there is an emphasis on what needs to be let go of, what needs to be released. Is it relationships? Is it attachments? Is it the old stories that I tell myself, the limiting belief loops that are in my mind? How can I go, I deserve better, and I'm going to let that go to allow space for new positivity and energy to move into my life?
Yeah. And so I think when we're talking about this idea of a shamanic self-care practice, there's two things that really come to mind for me at this point in the conversation. And the first is this idea of what you were saying, of so often we are working ourselves to death and we are separating ourselves from our soul. So if you ever get to that point where you're like, oh, I'm really burnt out, or I really need a break, or you've already gone too far, because we are these spiritual beings having a human experience, and it is vital to our overall well-being that we remain connected to both aspects of ourselves, the human side and taking care of our physical body and our mental health and all of these things that we're really aware of, I think, in our culture today, but also we need to be looking at our emotions and our energy and our soul, and knowing that there's a way to live our lives, there's a way to walk that path forward where we're connecting all of these aspects of ourselves. And so self-care really becomes this question of what areas, what aspects of you are you denying? What aspects of you haven't you looked at for a while? And so Christine was talking about all of the different lenses that you can use. And so when we're talking about a shamanic self-care approach, there's two main ones that really come to mind. There's the chakras, right? And looking at, in root chakra, are you grounded? Have you gone outside? Have you taken care of your physical body? And then we have sacral chakra. Are you using your imagination? Have you done anything creative lately? Have you connected with your inner child? We have solar plexus. What boundaries are you setting? Where are you finding your motivation? Have you done anything that makes you feel passionate lately? With your heart chakra, how are your relationships? How are those heartfelt connections? Have you allowed yourself to feel or give love lately? Throat chakra, communication. Have you spoken your truth recently, or have you kept those feelings bottled up? Have you really listened to the people around you who need you to hold space for them? Third eye, are you being able to take that big picture perspective and look at how your life is fitting in to the world on this broader spectrum. Have you tuned into your intuition? Have you meditated lately? And crown chakra, how's your connection with the divine? How are you feeling in terms of your connection with all that is, your space as a spiritual being? We have these really beautiful 7 areas of life that when we tune into them, it makes a really clear map to healing and a really clear map to self-care, because we can look at it and we can say, oh, you know what? I do need more creativity today. I've been really rigid in my work lately, and I need something that balances that out by stepping into a space of flow or mess or creativity or whatever it is. So I'm going to engage with my inner child today. The second framework that we can use is, from a shamanic perspective, really looking at the elements or the directions. And so each direction in shamanic tradition has a corresponding element. So we have the air in the east, we have the fire in the south, we have the water in the west, and we have the earth in the north. And so when we're looking at each of these, each element has its own aspects in terms of our personality, in terms of our energy, in terms of our emotions, right? So obviously water is going to be the depths, our ability to go with the flow, our ability to dive deeper than what we see on the surface. We have our fire, which is that passion, our ability to burn away and release anything that's no longer serving us, our ability to be like a phoenix and rise up from the ashes, right? That fire, that purpose, that drive. We have the wind, which is very much that like light, breezy energy of being open to new things, open to change, learning, getting those new whispers of wisdom that are coming through us. And then we have our earth, which is very much that grounded place of, are we present? Are we calm? Are we secure? All of these aspects of ourselves. And so when we're looking at how we're feeling today, if we're having a really anxious, depressed day, or an anxious day, let's start there, that might mean that we have a lot of wind energy going, right? We have a lot of that wind coming through and shaking things up, but we don't have a lot to ground it. And so maybe you need to lean into that north earth direction, and you need to go hug a tree. You need to go do some gardening. You need to go, throw something on the potter's wheel, like connecting to that grounded aspect. Where if we're having a really heavy, depressed day, that might say that we have an excess of that west or water energy, and we need to lean more into our fire and do something that makes us passionate, do something that gives us that drive. And so whether you are, leaning into these ideas and these lenses as your way of life or as part of your practice, or this is why, you do what you do, right? Christina and I are both shamanic practitioners, and it's become our life, right? This is how we view the entire world around us. But whether you choose to embody these ideas on a life level, or it's just a framework that you use to connect with yourself and connect with your self-care, having something that you connect to, whether it's the chakras or the directions or the elements or Maslow's hierarchy of needs or whatever it is, it can be really helpful to have a framework in place, a structure in place that we use to understand ourselves and the world around us. Because what that is doing is going back to what Christine and I were saying about this idea of permission. It can be a lot easier if we have a framework like the chakras to be able to look at that and say, oh, you know what needs love right now? My sacral chakra. And it makes it easier for us to give ourselves that permission to do what needs to be done, because we have this framework in place that tells us exactly where we're in balance. It's a weird psychology loophole that we have in our minds, right? But it's this idea of, it's now no longer us trying to force ourselves to be worthy to do self-care. It's, here's this framework, here's this map, and here's where it's imbalanced. So now I mentally have this logical explanation of why I'm feeling this way and what I need to do about it. And then on the flip side of that, continuing to do that work so that you know that you are worthy, you know that you are deserving, you know that you don't need a framework to give yourself permission to do the self-care, but it's a process, right? It's a practice, like we've been saying. And so it's really leaning into, what do you need at the end of the day, coming back to that idea and that knowing that it is a self-care practice. It is about you. And it is one of those areas where I always tell my students, part of your spiritual journey is learning how to be selfish. We have this like really intense squeamishness around this idea of being selfish. But from a shamanic perspective, we understand, there's that saying of the universe in a drop and a drop in the universe. Sometimes it's the ocean, right? You take a cup and you scoop out the water and you have the entire ocean in your cup, but it's also just a drop, right? You pour it back in and it goes back into the eternity that is the ocean. we are that drop. We are that cup full of water. And so when we are healing ourselves, when we're taking time for ourselves, when we are rebalancing all of these aspects of ourselves, we are on some level rebalancing the universe. We're bringing back that harmony. We're bringing back that balance. We're bringing back this natural inherent state of connection and flow. And so you can almost, in a way, see this self-care as an act of service to the earth, to the universe, to the divine, because when we are taking care of ourselves, when we're stepping back into this state of balance and flow, we are honoring the inherent nature of what the divine was meant to be, of what this spiritual being having a human experience was meant to be. And so if we're not taking the time to be balanced, to connect with these aspects of ourselves, we're actually turning away from this gift that we've been given of this life that we are here to cultivate, to experience on a spiritual and a human level. And so by doing this self-care, not only are you sending out those healing waves into the universe, and from a quantum perspective, changing the energy of literally everything else on the planet, right? But we're also honoring the divine. We're honoring the earth. We're honoring the life that is flowing through us by bringing it back and giving it the opportunity to come back to that state of balance and harmony.
I'm giggling over here because before Isabel says something, like my brain is already like on the step that she's going to. And I'm like, and then there's quantum entanglement and like all of these things where it's like, we have to really, and I love that. I love that this is one of my signs that I am in balance. When I know what my colleagues or my connections, I know what they're about to say, and I'm right on the same wavelength as they are, that's a sign that I'm in balance. I'm in alignment right now. And when we can recognize that we're all available to do our part, and your part is worthy to have its part. We're all a spark in the universe. We're all that cup full of ocean water. And when we can work on ourselves, we energetically create that response in our environments. And so oftentimes we have clients and students that want to figure out what they can do in their life to make an impact on the world, and so often it's very much, you need to work on you. It's not what you do, it's how you are. It's what you're embodying. And when you embody this knowingness of, I am worthy to heal, I'm worthy to shine my light, I'm worthy to live in my alignment, I'm worthy to walk my path, then in doing such, you're also giving permission to your children, to your parents, to your community members, to your online audience, whoever it may be, that they can do the same. And I think people forget that. Like, I live my light and therefore give permission to my children. I live my light, therefore I give permission to my parents to live in theirs, to offer inspiration to our Reiki Cafe community. And it's through telling the stories. It's not that I'm 100% in alignment, right? All of the time. You can go back to the very beginning of this recording and you can notice, even by my language and by my tone, where I was out of balance. It's not that we're perfect. And I think we need to give ourselves permission not to be perfect, not to always be in balance, but to give ourselves permission to recognize, I'm feeling off, and therefore I'm going to do some self-care, and to have it already placed in your schedule, whether this is by your regular routines, your morning routines, your evening routines, your mealtime routines. And when we can create those sacred spaces, they become shamanic. When we're doing it in a way of saying, I'm honoring the elements as I eat my food. And so we honor the sun for providing the light, the growth to create the meal, the plants, the animals, like all of that cycle of life. We're honoring the sun for providing that light. When we're thanking the earth for providing the nourishment for those plants and animals, we're giving thanks to the earth, and then the wind and the I'm missing one, the water, right? Of course. Like when we honor all of the four elements during our mealtime Reiki blessing, or when we're saying a prayer, or when we're saying grace, or whatever your family does, when we bring in those four element practices, and maybe you don't have a practice at all, and that's okay. And this is all you do, is you say thank you to each four of the elements for bringing your plate together. You're going to notice a big difference in your life, because it's when we bring in that gratitude and we bring in that connection to the elements. Like I'm getting goosebumps right now just talking about it, going, I'm going to drink my coffee, but I'm going to say thank you to the coffee beans, right? I'm going to say thank you to the process. Thank you to the farmers. Thank you to the persons who cultivate it. Thank you to the people who roasted it. Thank you for the delivery drivers who brought it to the store. Thank you for the storekeepers who put it on the shelves, all organized so I could find it. When we have that level of gratitude, we can come into a space of feeling connected to our divine source origins, whether that is in the earth or in the divine, because what our origin point is both.
Yeah. And I think what having this shamanic aspect to our self-care practice really comes down to is this knowing that there is so much depth and wonder and magic to be found beyond our everyday experiences, right? That's really what this shamanic perspective comes down to, is this knowing that we are more than our physical body. We are more than this physical reality. There's so much more to each and every moment than we usually allow ourselves to perceive. And so knowing that this shamanic self-care practice, it doesn't have to take long. It can be integrated into your daily life, right? Self-care is choosing positive self-talk instead of negative self-talk. Shamanic self-care is, like Christine said, finding gratitude for your meal and really being intentional about understanding all of the elements and all of the people and everything that went into this experience that you're now having, and really contemplating and understanding that inherent connection that we have to everything around us, right? Shamanic self-care can be drinking an extra glass of water because you haven't yet today, and maybe sending that water Reiki as you're drinking it. It doesn't have to be a lot. Our soul doesn't ask much of us, right? Our spiritual essence really doesn't require a lot of us, other than that we acknowledge it, other than that we connect with it and are intentional about remembering that we are more than just this present moment. We are more than just this physical body and this physical reality. There's so much depth and so much gratitude that we can have when we really lean into this understanding that we are spirit embodied. And when we have that understanding, everything can become an act of self-care, because we are coming back into connection and into harmony with every aspect of ourselves. And so, the start of your shamanic self-care practice might be looking at, how can this moment be a moment of self-care? Because what it can come down to is this understanding of, in every moment, there's some aspect of every moment that is nourishing you. There's a reason that you're having this experience. And so if we can lean into that, if instead of focusing on, if we're at work and we have a really stressful moment happening, instead of focusing on the stress or what you have to do or all these things, you can focus on, but you know what? I have this really comfortable chair. And I am really grateful that through all of this stress, I'm able to sit in this really comfortable chair. That's my personal example right now, because I just got an actual office chair and it's life-changing, right? But now it's every time I sit at my desk, there is an element of self-care to it, because this is a chair that I picked out because I have a lot of hip issues after dancing for 18 years, and not every chair is comfortable. And so I decided I was worthy to find a chair that fit my needs, not a traditional office chair, not what quote unquote should have gone here, but what I needed. And so now every time I come to work, instead of thinking about my to-do list or all of these things, it's coming back to, I have this really comfortable chair, and maybe I have a cup of tea, and maybe I say an affirmation before I start work. And that is self-care. It doesn't have to be this long drawn out thing. It can be, right? We can create these really beautiful rituals and ceremonies and sacred spaces that are just for self-care. And it's so important to bring that into our daily life too, right? That's another aspect of that shamanic tradition that's so important, is understanding that even outside of our journeys, even outside of our Reiki sessions, if you're a yoga practitioner, you hear this is even off your mat, right? In our daily lives, we carry these traditions forward, we carry these ideas forward so that we continue to acknowledge our soul, we continue to acknowledge the divine, we continue to acknowledge our human self in each moment so that we can continue that balance. The goal is to have that state of balance as often as we can for as long as we can, right? Whether you're calling that balance or flow or alignment or whatever it is, we want to carry that forward rather than staying in this cycle that we usually have in our society of being really, really unbalanced and then having to take a vacation to get rebalanced and then going right back. We want to see if we can even that out and come back into this alignment and this understanding that we are that spiritual essence. We are more than just here and now. And when we tap into that, we are immediately honoring ourselves, honoring the divine, honoring our soul. And that is really the basis of a self-care practice.
Yes. Yeah. So you have your daily activities, your daily routines. And then for me, it's very much like I want things scheduled in. I need those big chunks, not big chunks. Like I'm not doing a weekend retreat. Sometimes I do, but for the most part, like I want to have a couple hours a week that's dedicated to I'm feeding myself. I'm feeding myself spiritually. I'm feeding myself energetically. I'm feeding myself on a deeper level so that I'm honoring that passion within me to do the self-care work. And so for me that, and it can look different for everyone, but for me, it's like, I know my physical body needs some physical therapy, and that can be self-care, right? Like I don't have anyone telling me I need it and I have to have it. It's that I want it and I know it's good for me. And I'm open to the possibility of having spiritual healing in that space, which is really interesting. So this is a story that happened this last week. This was after going to my chakra dance class, which is a 2-hour dance, very shamanic experience of dancing to music and really embracing and coming together with your guides and your power animals. And it's phenomenal, right? I love it. So I did that. And then after that, couple days later, I did a trance breath work and I really moved some big energy there. And I connected with some celestial guides and I breathed and it was amazing and all good. And then I go to physical therapy a couple days later. And, it was very interesting because those other spaces were group spaces. I wasn't alone. The chakra dance, I knew it was a completion of a 9-week course. So I knew everyone in class and I had gotten comfortable with them and I would have been fine crying in front of all of them, right? Like that wasn't the issue. And then breath work, there was like 30 people there. It was pretty intense, but I created my Reiki bubble around my little nest and I felt safe and I could process what I needed to process in that. Going to physical therapy, and we do dry needling, which is basically putting needles into tense muscles to allow them to spasm and release any heavy energy. That's the way I like to look at it. So it's not acupuncture. It really is muscle work. And I had been feeling really tight, which I go weekly because this is like an issue, right? And here she is, like she's putting needles in and I break down. I'm having a flood of tears and I've never had a somatic release in her office before, but I've been seeing her in 9 months, pretty regularly. And it goes to show that sometimes we're holding things that we're unconscious of. And when it's ready to come forward, perhaps the chakra dance allowed to do some weeding work to prep the soil for this, as well with the trance breath work. It was getting my body ready for this release, but it was that I was consistently returning to shamanic self-care of going, I'm putting myself in a position to allow whatever needs to come through, to release. And when I was in that process of releasing, I felt safe. And there's the other thing. You're only available to do the level of healing work in which you feel safe. If you don't feel 100% safe, it's not going to be complete. It's not going to be 100%, right? And I feel like all of that work was tilling the soil so that when I went to physical therapy, which was a very regular, traditional, I don't have a woo-woo physical therapist. She is an everyday mom, And yet I was available to do the healing work. I was able to have this big, profound shift in my physical body that was holding on so tight to some stress, to some heaviness that was within me. And so I wanted to share that story to let you know that, yes, sometimes it's saying yes to things over and over and over again and allowing yourself to do that work. And so whether that is you're doing coursework with Reiki Cafe University and you have a cohort and you're feeling safe in there and you're doing sessions and you're willing to peel back the layers of that shadow work, that is self-care. And then also, how do we come back to our regular parasympathetic nervous system at the end of the day of going, I'm relaxed, I'm safe, all is well. I'm relaxed, I'm safe, all is well. And what do you need to come to that space in your life, and noticing how your life shifts and changes as you do the work, as you doing the healing practices, and honoring your progress, honoring your wins, allowing those success stories to come through, going, yeah, I did the work and this happened and I'm so grateful. And sharing that can be really a profound journey and process.
And so knowing that at the end of all of this, the takeaways for you today from this conversation are this idea that first and foremost, self-care is really giving yourself permission to do whatever it is that you need to do in each moment, no matter what that is, right? That's the first step to true self-care, is nourishing yourself, finding how you need to give yourself permission to do what you need to do in each moment. And then moving into this understanding that we're looking for balance when it comes to self-care. What do you need to bring balance back into your system, to bring back that alignment, that flow, whatever term resonates for you, and whatever lens you want to look through, right? And then looking at this understanding that anything can be self-care, that when we bring in our intention, when we bring in our energy, when we really set this intention that we are worthy for this self-care, everything can become self-care, because you see opportunities in each moment. And you can lean into, is today a day where I need to go to a chakra dance class, or I need to take time out to read, or I need to make myself an extra cup of tea, where we have these built-in scheduled moments to come back to ourselves. And then we continue to come back and back and back throughout our day, whether that's, I always tell my students, never underestimate the power of a well-timed bathroom break in the middle of the day. To be able to just go to the bathroom, close the door, nobody has to know what you're doing. Maybe you're just taking a few deep breaths. Maybe you're meditating. Maybe you're connecting with your guides. Maybe you're doing a quick self-Reiki session. It doesn't matter. But there are ways and spaces that we can step back into connecting with ourselves, what we need, what the divine is calling us towards in each moment. And at the end of the day, that shamanic self-care really needs to be self-care. So if your idea of self-care is something that we haven't even mentioned in today's coffee conversation, go for it. It's so much more important that you're doing the thing that your intuition is calling you to, that when you ask yourself that question of, if I was brutally honest, what do I need most right now? Your answer to that question is what you need most, whether it's something that you've heard from someone else or not. It's your soul calling out to you to come back into that balance, come back into that flow, and come back into that alignment, so that as you move forward, you can move forward in your highest potential and embodying your highest self. And that's, again, coming back to, what do you need? How are you going to find that balance? And how can you incorporate that into everyday moments, knowing that there is so much more to each moment that you can allow yourself to see and tap into and be grateful for.
Yes. And so with that, thank you so much for listening. Know that all of our Reiki Cafe University courses has this theme. Like, we very much want you to recognize your own self-worth, that you are worthy to come into this place of alignment. We believe in it. We believe that if you are in a clarity, flow like state, that place of alignment, you are meant to bring amazing beauty into this world. And we want everyone to shine their light in whatever capacity that looks like for you. And seeing each person as unique, that we're not going to put a box on you of going, this is what it's supposed to look like, and this is how you have to do it, and this is the only way. None of that language is anywhere inside of our programs, our coursework. And so we just want to invite you, like, if you need support and you know that you are unique and you're not going to do it like everybody else, please reach out to us. We're here to help you and support you. We've got a lovely team at ReikiCafe University that are skilled practitioners, masterful practitioners, to help you come to this beautiful place, and that we have some lovely frameworks, whether we're looking through the chakras or shamanic 4 elements. We want to be able to help you kind of find your path and your clarity and your passion and your strengths and your beauty and all of the things. And so know that whether you are coming to our in-person workshops coming up, or you are planning on joining us for Soul Rising in the fall, like, we want to honor your process and coming into the light. So thank you all so much for joining in and listening today.
Absolutely. Thanks, everyone. Sending so much love and light, and we'll see you next time.